Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a story that's been unfolding for, gosh, over 2 decades now. It touches on everything from huge pop music stardom to, well, some really shocking allegations of serious crimes. It's a saga that just keeps revealing new, unsettling layers. Today, we're doing a deep dive into incredibly complex and persistent controversies surrounding Gloria Trevi, her husband Armando Gómez, and of course, the inescapable shadow of Sergio Andrade. We've sifted through a whole stack of sources here, and they paint this really intricate picture, this web of alleged sexual abuse, corruption of minors, labor exploitation, and then you've got these serious financial accusations too, like tax fraud and money laundering. So, our mission today is to try and pull out the most important insights from all this material. We really want to focus on the international legal side of things and maybe try to understand why these systemic issues seem to have, well, evaded a complete resolution by justice systems around the world for so long.
Yeah, and what's fascinating when you look at it all together is how these seemingly separate threads, the human stories of the alleged victims, which are profoundly disturbing, and then the kind of nitty-gritty of transnational finance, how they're actually deeply interconnected. It suggests it's not just like a series of bad things happening. It points towards this systemic problem, something structural that really demands a much closer, much more critical look. So, yeah, we'll definitely explore the gravity of this long-standing issue and what some sources are calling the silence or even the international blindness of the legal system in actually tackling it head on. It's quite the puzzle why justice seems so hard to come by here.
Right. And to really get a handle on what's happening now, we kind of have to rewind a bit, look at the origins. For those of you who've maybe followed the story over the years, you'll remember the clan Trevi-Andrade. Our sources describe it as having sect-like qualities. It was first really linked to Gloria Trevi back in 1998, and the initial accusations were, just chilling. Sexual abuse, corruption of minors, labor exploitation. It all really came to a head with that big international event. Their arrest in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That was January 13th, 2000. The charges were kidnapping, rape, and corruption of minors. Now, Trevi spent nearly 3 years in a Brazilian prison without trial. Then she was acquitted and released in 2004. Sergio Andrade, on the other hand, he was eventually convicted in 2007 and served 7 years and 10 months.
And what's really crucial there, I think, is that description, the sect-like organization, the alleged physical, psychological, and sexual abuse of multiple young people. It points to something way beyond just isolated incidents, doesn't it? It suggests a structured, prolonged pattern of behavior, almost like an organized criminal enterprise that was operating for years. And the fact that these accusations have just persisted for over 2 decades. Look at the 2024 complaint to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. It accuses the Mexican state itself of corruption, of inaction. That really screams systemic failures,
Yeah.
Failures in protecting basic human rights, failures in the administration of justice. It says a lot about the challenges when you're dealing with these kinds of deep-seated problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this one detail in the sources that just, it hits you. Think about Gloria Trevi's huge hit song, Pelo Suelto, Loose Hair. It became this massive anthem, right? A symbol of freedom, liberation. But then you find out that the very same phrase, the girl with the loose hair, was tragically used, according to these sources, to identify Karina Yapur, one of the alleged victims within the clan, in the context of her alleged victimization by Andrade.
Oh, wow.
It's such a stark, powerful reminder of how a public image, these symbols of freedom, can be twisted, maybe even used as tools of control, masking something much, much darker for the people trapped inside. The irony is just, it's just unsettling. Okay, so that's the history, the background. Let's fast forward to today, because this is far from over. New legal battles are actually kicking off right now. Starting back in December 2022, new lawsuits were filed against Gloria Trevi in California, in the U.S., and these relate back to those alleged abuses from the 1990s, sexual abuse, corruption of minors, and the claims are specific, detailed. You have Jane Doe Casey, who says she was 15 back in 1991. She alleges Trevi actually lured her into Andrade's group and even prepared her to be a sexual slave. Then there's Jane Doe A.H., who was just 13 in 1989. She alleges Trevi introduced her to Andrade's world. Both of them claim they were whipped, beaten, deprived of food. Horrific stuff. And there's even a new Jane Doe 3. She was over 18 in 1995. Her allegation is that Trevi led her to Andrade's room, literally pushed her inside, waited outside while the alleged rape happened, and then thanked her afterwards, saying something like, "You just saved your sister, you won't regret it."
It really makes you ask, okay, why now? Why are these demands, these lawsuits, emerging decades after the alleged events? And the sources give us some insight there. They suggest survivors often wait. They wait for maybe the right moment, perhaps legal reforms that open a window, or just reaching a point where they feel safe enough to come forward. It really underscores that the silence of victims often isn't about the abuse not happening. It's frequently a direct result of systemic barriers or just overwhelming fear, especially fear of reprisal when you're up against powerful people. It highlights how incredibly difficult it is to seek justice in these situations.
Right. And then, just as these new claims are surfacing, Gloria Trevi makes her own move. She files a counter lawsuit against Sergio Andrade. In this suit, filed December 27, 2023, she positions herself as a primary victim of his abuse. She alleges Andrade repeatedly and brutally raped her, that it drove her to attempt suicide. She claims he subjected her to sadistic punishments, starvation, brutal beatings, and she even alleges Andrade impregnated dozens of young women and girls and manipulated them into having abortions.
Now, the sources, especially when you look at comments from California legal experts, they strongly suggest this is, well, less about a spontaneous revelation of past trauma and more of a highly strategic legal maneuver. The timing is pretty telling, isn't it? Filed right as that window for bringing older abuse cases was closing in California under specific law, it looks very much like a calculated tactic, an attempt to sort of shift from accused to victim in the public eye and in the legal arena. It's about redefining her role as these new civil cases against her are heating up. Definitely part of a defense strategy.
And, something that often gets less attention in stories like this but seems crucial here is the money side of things, the financial underpinning. Our sources reveal that beyond all the harrowing abuse allegations, there's this really complex and frankly troubling financial picture involving Trevi and her husband, Armando Gómez. Mexico's Financial Intelligence Unit, the UIF, they actually filed a formal criminal complaint back in September 2021 against both Gloria Trevi and Armando Gómez Martinez. And the accusations are significant. We're talking probable tax evasion. The amount mentioned is 400 million pesos. That's roughly 22 million US dollars, and also money laundering. The investigation specifically names a couple of companies, Fuego con Fuego Representaciones, SADCV in Mexico, and Great Talent LLC, which is registered over in Texas, USA. There's even a specific example detailed a deposit of 7.1 million pesos made to Fuego con Fuego, where the corresponding taxes allegedly weren't paid.
And what's really striking here is this isn't like out of the blue for Armando Gómez. He actually has a prior legal history involving financial offenses. He was detained way back in 1999, trying to transport $410,000 in cash into Mexico without declaring it. That led to a conviction in 2005. So this establishes, you could say, a historical pattern of alleged financial irregularities, a kind of modus operandi. And the investigation into these companies, like Fuego con Fuego, suggests it might have been created specifically for, quote, illicit purposes. Gómez's reported actions, like closing and reopening bank accounts, seem like deliberate efforts to obscure the flow of money. Now, this financial opacity, it could serve multiple purposes, right? Evading taxes, sure, but potentially also managing illicit gains from other activities, maybe even activities related to the whole clan Trevi-Andrade setup. It really points to potentially deeper links between the financial structures and the alleged systemic abuses we talked about earlier. How money might enable or sustain that kind of exploitation.
Interesting. Now, Gloria Trevi, her public stance on these financial things has been pretty consistent. She denies responsibility, says she's willing to collaborate. She's even claimed she has a tax credit in her favor. Armando Gómez, though, he's taken a different tack. More aggressive, kind of dismissing new accusations as just coming from haters, even though there are formal complaints and detailed allegations from authorities. So you have to wonder, what does this all mean for their current relationship? There's definitely public concern mentioned in the sources about a super aggressive treatment and this perception that Trevi might be, quote, dominated by a system of Armando Gómez. There have been viral videos showing pretty intense confrontations at concerts. And remember that incident from a reality show where Gómez reportedly threw Trevi's phone into water?
It raises a really critical question, doesn't it? Does this current dynamic with Armando Gómez maybe perpetuate a pattern of control? Perhaps one that echoes, in some ways, what Trevi allegedly experienced with Sergio Andrade. Now, obviously, the nature of the control is different. Andrade's alleged control was characterized by horrific sexual abuse. Gómez's influence stems from his multifaceted role. He's her representative, her lawyer, her husband. That gives him substantial power, substantial influence. But these public incidents, combined with the ongoing financial investigations, well, they suggest a pattern of behavior. And while it's not mirroring Andrade's specific alleged crimes, it could absolutely indicate a different form of control. It really points to the need to look closely at power dynamics, at vulnerability, especially in these high-profile relationships where there's financial and professional dependency intertwined, and how these dynamics might allow systemic issues to just keep going, even decades later.
Okay, before we dig deeper into those systemic issues and the international angle, let's just quickly clear something up. We had a listener ask about some misinformation going around about Sergio Andrade. There were some reports or queries about a new capture of his in Brazil, maybe in 2023 or 2024. Just to be clear, our sources confirm he was arrested back in 2000. There's absolutely no evidence of any recent detention, his current whereabouts. Honestly, the sources say it's practically a mystery. His location isn't known in official documents. There's speculation he might be living off song royalties, but nobody seems to know for sure.
Right. But despite being physically, off the map, Andrade remains absolutely central to the ongoing legal story. He's named as a defendant in those new U.S. civil lawsuits by the Jane Does. And, of course, he's the primary target of Gloria Trevi's own counter-lawsuit. So it really highlights how the system he allegedly created continues to cast this long, dark, penetrating shadow over everything. And this brings us right back to that crucial point, the listener's perception of ceguera international, that international blindness, the idea that countries, international treaties seem somehow unable to fully address this, the sheer length of time these accusations have been around, the difficulty in achieving any kind of comprehensive justice across borders. Yeah, that is a central concern here. It really does point to a kind of critical silence or maybe willful blindness within the global justice system.
Yeah, and it's important to say it's not like there are no tools, no frameworks out there. Our sources mention things like the Interpol-UNICEF agreement from April 2023, specifically designed to fight child sexual exploitation. And there's the Central American Convention for the Prevention and Combat of Commercial Sexual Exploitation and Trafficking of Girls, Boys, and Adolescents. That mandates specific legal provisions. It invalidates the idea of consent for minors. It sets penalties, even talks about extradition possibilities. So on paper, the mechanisms seem to exist.
Exactly. And that's the core of the problem, isn't it? Despite having these, pretty robust-looking frameworks on paper, there are clearly significant challenges in actually applying them effectively on the ground. That 2024 complaint to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the one accusing the Mexican state itself of corruption and inaction in the Trevi-Andrade case, that just vividly illustrates the huge gap between the principles in these treaties and the reality of implementation. The fact that powerful figures can seemingly evade justice or drag cases out for decades without any definitive resolution, it points squarely at limitations in transnational cooperation, maybe a lack of political will, maybe insufficient resources, probably a mix of things. And, even the global Me Too movement, which has done so much to expose abuse in various industries, its impact here seems more, let's say, nuanced. While it definitely encouraged more reporting globally, the kind of public skepticism you still see around the Trevi case, especially if you look at platforms like TikTok, it shows this really deep division. It suggests that cultural factors, maybe specific perceptions of impunity in certain contexts, can really limit how effective even a powerful global movement can be in achieving visible justice everywhere. It feeds into that sense of international blindness we were talking about.
Right. And let's touch on Gloria Trevi's public defense strategy again, how she's trying to manage the narrative. Her PR approach has been quite formal, official statements, denying responsibility, pledging cooperation, even claiming that tax credit. But then there's the TikTok angle we mentioned. It's fascinating, really. Her legal team seems to be strategically using platforms like TikTok to push her counter lawsuit against Andrade. But what's really interesting is when you actually look at the comment sections on those posts, they often reveal this deep, deep public skepticism. You see lots of comments like, I don't believe her, or she always defended Andrade back then.
Absolutely. And that use of the countersuit. It's widely interpreted by legal observers, by segments of the public, as a very deliberate strategic maneuver. The goal seems to be to shift from accused to victim. It's an attempt to divert attention away from these new, very serious abuse allegations that have been filed against her. This instrumentalization of her own past victimhood, it's about controlling the narrative, not just in the courtroom, but in the much wider court of public opinion. Leveraging her own documented past suffering to try and counter the current accusations, a very modern, very digital approach to managing public perception during a high-stakes legal fight.
So when we try to pull all these different threads together, what's the big takeaway here? Our deep dive into this whole Gloria Trevi saga, it really lays bare this incredibly complex, multifaceted story. Alleged abuse, exploitation, financial irregularities, all stretching over decades. It feels like it's much more than just a series of isolated incidents, doesn't it? It suggests a kind of system. A system with a remarkable ability to adapt, to persist, impacting so many lives, and seemingly managing to evade full accountability. This isn't just a story about famous individuals. It feels like it's about the profound challenges in getting justice when you're up against these entrenched transnational systems of alleged crime and cover-up.
Exactly. It really forces us to ask that hard question. How can justice truly be served when you're facing issues that are so entrenched, so transnational? Issues that seem to exploit the very gaps in our global legal and financial safety nets. The fact that complaints keep surfacing, the ongoing financial opacity, that persistent public perception of impunity, it demands sustained attention. It demands coordinated action from authorities, judicial, financial, but within countries and internationally. Achieving justice for all the alleged victims, whether from the past or the present, that is remaining the absolute unwavering priority. That critical silence, that blindness we've discussed, it's what has allowed this situation to fester for so long.
Yeah. And these ongoing legal battles, the sheer fact that these accusations have persisted for so long, it forces us, and maybe you listening, to consider what is the actual true cost of silence. Whether that's the enforced silence of victims fearing reprisal, the silence of potential complicity, or maybe the perceived silence in the blind spots of international bodies, what's the cost of allowing these prolonged patterns of alleged abuse and exploitation to just continue? And maybe the final thought for you is, what can any of us do to make sure that these blind spots in our global justice system are really finally brought into the light?